And just to give you guys an idea of what I work on at the shop, this is a Weinman pump. And when you pull these from a job site, like we did at the hospital, it has a huge bowl that also has to come out because the bowl gets bolted to this flange, and then once the bowl is on, then the impeller can go on this part of the shaft. So my coker, he made the shaft. I just cut the keyways in the middle, and he drilled and tapped it on the end because the impeller is held in by a bolt, and you always want it to be stainless because this whole assembly with the impeller, the bolt, and the seal all live in inside water. They're pumping water through pipes. So you want this bolt and the washer to be stainless so they don't rust out. And so this is the impeller. I had to sand down the key a little bit, as you can see on the sides. I left the top and bottom because those are okay. So it fits good into the keyway in the impeller, but the 1/4 inch end mill that the only one we have in the shop, doesn't quite cut it to a full 250 thousandths. So every time I make my cut and then run it back, it doesn't quite take all the 250 thousandths. So what I would do is I'll take this to the belt sander, sand 2 sides of it, and just keep doing that until it can fit nicely in there. And you see this key actually sticks out slightly past the shaft, but that's okay because I did a test fit with the impeller onto the shaft, and the key doesn't come out past this face. And so that stainless washer I showed you from the box will sit nice and flat on this face once it's on the shaft. And this is the old seal. Every seal has a kind of a carbon piece and then a ceramic piece, and they sit tight against each other with spring tension, and that is how you create a seal. So when it eventually fails, it'll start leaking, and that's how you know you gotta replace the seal. And while you're in there, you might as well replace the bearings. And I heated new bearings on with that blue bearing heater you see there, because the old bearings, this one came off okay, but the front one, the drive side bearing here, it was actually, the inner race of it was on, kind of almost welded itself because it got so hot to the old shaft. And so just the outer race was left stuck in the housing. We had to knock it out. So once we got everything cleaned up, we mic'd the fits. You know, got the outboard bearing here and the drive side bearing here. Fits were good. So after heating the new bearings on, let them cool down, took the rotating assembly, put it in to the Weinman pump housing. And this particular one has 6 bolts on a plate that kind of sits on the front side of the drive side bearing. And then you got a little rubber slinger so you don't get any water going into the bearing. And this plate also has a grease button, so you can grease the bearing, but we left the shields on because that's normally recommended. And then lastly, if you can see that, I put a punch mark here and here to remember how this plate is clocked so that the grease button is accessible and not like straight up into the top of the housing where it's not accessible. You generally just want to put stuff back the way it was. And this is where the seal seat will go, which is this piece here, but the new one in the box. And these sometimes have a rubber cup that they sit into, but this one just has a rubber O-ring around it. Of course, you install it with steel grease, and it'll go down in there. And then with that big bowl piece, which is at the job site, which I can't show you right now, this will get bolt to the bowl piece because this has 2 holes. It'll have bolts coming through it. And this face has to be nice and clean. There has to be a gasket right here so you don't have any leaks that way. And then of course you have the coupling half, which is going to go on this end of the shaft. And again, had to do some sanding on the key to make it slide in there real nice. And then this will slide on there. And if you look at the other side, this coupling half, it has all these teeth. So a rubber element will go inside here, and then the motor at the job site will have a matching one of these, and then the rubber will fit into this side and the other half. And as the motor turns, it will turn the coupling, which in turn will turn the pump, which will turn the impeller, and the fins will fling the water up the pipe at really high pressure so water can be pumped through the building. And is there anything else I want to show you on this pump while I'm here? Oh, this particular one had a brass spacer. So the impeller is the last thing on the drive side, pump side, and the shaft. This brass spacer goes right behind it, and this particular one, they had it helping set the tension on the seal. So I believe this went something like that. So every time you take something apart, you have to make note of all the little details so you can put it back the way it was, and then it'll work correctly, it won't leak, and you won't prematurely burn up the bearings or anything like that. Yeah, I think that's all I got for you. And this gasket is super thin, so this is my third try, because not only does it have to fit in there on the outside diameter and fit in there pretty snug, but the inside diameter has to not come in too narrow to the rest of the gap. All the little things that go into working at a machine shop, but this rotating assembly is good. Heated up the bearings, everything went well with that. And then you got a grease plug for the outboard bearing. But again, left the shields on because that's normally protocol. Any more videos like this you want to see, you let me know. Maybe some assembly videos perhaps. And I'll see you in the next machining video.